So it's a very important day for me, which I was waiting since a year and a half. It has been a long process. So I would like first to thank Antonio. The idea of Behave comes from his vision first, and so I'd like to thank you. I remember that phone call you gave me. Proposed me this kind of moving to Milan and establishing a new lab. So thank you very much. He has been instrumental for the whole thing. And I would like also to thank my colleagues. I saw some of them because they share the same kind of idea of Antonio, and I know how much part of this kind of budget was allocated to my position. So it was a really brave decision, and I hope to give back this kind of trust and the expectation that probably you have on this kind of development of the lab. So I would like also to thank Matthew and Andreas for accepting our invitation to join this meeting. I do believe that it's not by chance that you are here, and I see a lot of complementarities between your different kind of research agenda and vision. So I hope that we all learn about this kind of possible complementarities between big data, experiments, and computational models. So I think that it's very good today. So I would like just to show you a little bit about the idea, if I succeed in moving this thing here. Okay, good. You find a lot of information on the lab in the Behave website there, but I would like to summarize a little bit what is the vision behind Behave. So there's many experimental groups now popping up also in Italy, but especially in Europe, and so Behave is not new in terms of experimental research. But I would like to suggest, or at least to share, what is the peculiarity of Behave compared to other kind of experimental groups. So the idea is to try to develop research and training as well by integrating different methodologies, which typically are developing a little bit in parallel or independently, and try to integrate them into a coherent framework. And I mention especially the experimental methods of research. So, performing well-controlled experiments on the microscopic scale of agent behavior and interaction, either in the lab, in the field, or online, and agent-based modeling. So the idea to simulate agent behavior and interaction on the larger scale in artificial scenarios, so in the computer. These kind of two streams of research are very important. They have a lot in common because they start from the idea of explaining social behavior or social aggregates or social patterns in terms of agent interaction, so at the macro level. So we spin the macroscopic patterns starting from specifying microscopic behaviors. Yeah, they share this. But obviously, experimental research is a little bit constrained in terms of the size or the complexity of the system that can be modeled or manipulated or observed in the lab. Whereas the computer simulation, especially agent-based modeling, which is very coherent with experimental research because it starts from modeling agent behavior and agent interaction and understanding consequences at the macroscopic scale, agent-based modeling does not have this kind of limitation. We might perform simulation of millions of agents at the same time. And especially, we don't have ethical implications because artificial agent, we don't need informed consent on artificial agents, and so we might abuse them in many different ways without any kind of implications. So the idea of Behave is try to integrate this, to make experiments and the simulation speaking the same language and enrich each other by this kind of integration. And this is what we call, probably you see, computational augmentation of experimental research. So the idea that experimental research can be augmented when it forms or when it's based on computer simulation. So using computer simulation able to replicate exactly observation in the lab, replicating exactly the experiments and the human behavior in the lab into the computer, and augment, scale up, test and manipulate parameters which is hardly or even impossible to manipulate into the lab because of economic reasons. Agents can't, individuals in the lab can decide for infinite times. They have typically 40 minutes of effort, and also for ethical implications. So for instance, we can't model or we can't observe complex social structure of interaction in the lab. Whereas in the computer simulation, we might stress and manipulate and test the implications of complex social structural interactions. So it is to try to integrate these two. In this kind of integration lies our true understanding of what behavioral sociology truly is. So this is the first idea. And there's a big tradition of, by the way, experimental research in sociology since from the 30s of the last century. So the first experimental research published in the social sciences ever has been published in a journal of sociologists, so American Journal of Sociology, for instance. Then, for a number of reasons, experimental research has been forgotten for decades. Now it's coming back. So the idea is that try to exploit this kind of origins. So this gives you an example of the projects of research that we will perform. So we have been granted by the Minister of University Education and Research under the PRIN funding scheme, together with the University of Torino and the CNR in Rome, to study intergroup conflicts. So the role of retaliation and forgiveness in the intergroup conflicts. So there will be an experimental side, so there will be experiments on retaliation, forgiveness, and reputation between groups in the lab, intergroups conflicts in the lab. There will be survey experiments performed, especially a survey performed on a representative population of the Italian population, with the idea to study differences between the southern and northern culture of forgiveness, to understand if cultural factors can explain why forgiveness and retaliation seem to be different in different kind of cultural context. And this is the behave role. The behave role will be to calibrate agent-based modeling on experimental and survey data to try to test long-term, large-scale implications of what we will be able to observe in the previous research. So this is just to give an example of the first kind of projects that behavior will be working on. But research is nothing without training. So the idea is that we would like to integrate research and training. So the idea is that we would like to try to invest in growing a new generation of social scientists more close, more familiar with this kind of computational frontiers of research. And I guess that these two gentlemen who will speak later will inspire a little bit about these kind of new frontiers. This is an example of the Behave initiatives in terms of training. We have a summer school on agent-based modeling for social scientists, which has quite a tradition. There's a couple of members of this faculty here. And today, this kind of summer school will be an intensive hands-on school on NetLower and agent-based modeling, exactly targeted to social scientists, so without any kind of preconditions in terms of computing previous experience. And I'm very happy to announce that we will be joined by Joshua Epstein, leading scholar now in New York State University, one of the most important and influential scholars in the use of computational social sciences and agent-based modeling. And there will be Tatiana Finatova from the University of Twente, who is doing incredible work in integrating empirical data into agent-based modeling. And there will be Nicolas Payet from the University of Oxford, who will help us in training these students. However, we also do have a training initiative. The vision is to try to align training from the undergraduates to the PhD and postdoc level in the same kind of line or vision. And so I just ended last week my first course here in Milan with my undergraduate in sociology, and I'm very happy about that. And we also have, and that's also, I would like to thank you, I mean, all the colleagues who stimulated this idea to have a course on behavioral sociology for the master students in one of the new, also one of the new training that will be on social data analytics, a combination between big data and social sciences, which is another very important investment in this kind of project. So that's all. And this is the advisory board of Behave. So we have a group of colleagues with whom we will share our vision, our strategic vision of the lab, in order to have comments and feedback and opinion. I'm very also happy to see that Andres is here. And but this is the 6 advisory board members. And I also especially love this poll that Bridget accepted to join us from the Volterra Consulting, the same partner Paul Armour this year. And Bridget will, I expect that Bridget will stimulate, especially not only the academic side of the Behave research and training, but also the potential representation of an important stakeholder. So we have also here someone from ING and for also fintech around here. So we will try to invest a little bit in creating an ecology of stakeholders or entities interested in collaborating with Behave, either in research or in training initiative like internships of our students in the in-house. So that basically what I wanted to say today. I'm more than happy to give floor to Matthew Salganic from Princeton. If I remember, and there's a table there, you can find the 2 copies of the book. I kindly ask you not to pick up the copies for you. They are just complimentary to. But there's a flyer there where you can order copies of the book with an incredible discount for this from Princeton. So, Matthew, the floor is yours. Thank you.